What's up, guys? Welcome back to the MMA meeting. Let's talk with the Weasel podcast, where we talk all things MMA, and I hope you guys are having an amazing time. And man, I cannot thank the community enough. I cannot thank the feedback, the support, all the engagement, the discussions, everything. I cannot thank you guys enough. We hit 300,000 subscribers. Such a big milestone, man. My goal is to hit 1 million one day. I don't know when that's going to be. It's so surreal to even think about. Content creators and fighters have been watching since I was like a kid. Reach out to me, support what I do. They give me high praise, and I'm not gonna lie, it stresses me out a bit. I so appreciate it, but it's so surreal. It's like something I never expected. I'm just a young foreign guy from Detroit with big dreams, that's it. I can't thank you guys enough. Thank you to all the fighters that have reached out to me. Thank you to the content creators. Thank you all the fans. Thank you all my viewers. But we keep on going. I really wanted to thank you guys ever since I hit 300,000. And let's get into some MMA talk. The last few UFC cards have actually been pretty good, man. The fight nights, the pay-per-views, everything seems on point at the moment. The last card especially was so good. That was the preview of the future of the UFC. With Gamrot, with Tsarukyan, with Shavkat, potentially Thiago Moises, because he is younger than people realize. He's like 27 years old. Umar Nurmagomedov might be the champion in the future. Chris Curtis could be something, but he is a bit older, so I actually think he's in his prime right now. Does he have enough time to make it into the top 5? Because he's fighting unranked fighters like Adolfo Vieira. Man, people were doubting Carlos Ulberg. I posted that Carlos Ulberg is another prospect on that card that has a lot of potential. Like, he could be a future, maybe contender or something. And some of you guys were hilarious, being like, who is this guy? There's no way we're putting Ulberg in the same list as the other prospects on the card, but he delivered, knocked the guy out in a little over a minute. And here's the thing, even though Ulberg is 31 years old, he's a light heavyweight. He only has 6 professional fights in MMA. He has some kickboxing fights, but he doesn't have an extensive career anywhere. I mean, his first pro kickboxing fight was back in 2016. So what I think the problem with Ulberg is, he isn't putting things together quick enough for people to realize his potential. Because we can all see it, man. He's super athletic, right? He's a big guy. He has power. He's fast. He trains with one of the best teams on the planet. But we have to cut him some slack because, again, he doesn't have much experience. The improvements are going to come fast, like the individual, kickboxing improvements, wrestling improvements, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu improvements, but it takes experience for him to put things together. And that's the thing that might come later. He looked great in this fight, but we got to see what he comes up with next. I mean, that fade-out left hook was beautiful and showed gruesome power to finish off his opponent. I mean, it was very violent. That was quite exciting to see from Ulberg. And here's the thing, man. Even if MMA doesn't work out for him, the guy has a career in modeling. He's a beautiful man. Pause. And what else was beautiful was that main event. The wrestling scrambles were out of this world. I am still so impressed with what those two guys were able to do. Fight of the night, 100%. But I do think Shailin versus TJ Brown definitely delivered, man. That was a fight I was looking forward to. I honestly thought Shailin was older than he is. The guy's only 28 years old with 48 professional fights. And that guy's a tank. If we're talking about like human bulldozers, pound for pound, that's as strong as you can get. Muscling over TJ Brown so easily. There was a clear strength difference between the two guys, and TJ Brown's a big fighter. Shailin could be a problem for some guys. I don't foresee him being like top 15, but he could definitely give some guys a run for their money. And he's always going to be pretty fun to watch. And Mateusz Gamrot actually went up in the rankings to number 8. He went up higher than I thought he was going to go. Arman didn't even change spots, which I like to see that because he put on a very good effort. It was a very close fight. These guys are almost evenly matched. Gamrot has some experience on him, man. That's pretty much the main difference of that fight. Arman has never gone 5 rounds before. Gamrot went 5 rounds multiple times in the past, so he was used to this. And Arman's 25 years old and Gamrot's 31. All the way till the end, it was super close. And just that experience advantage that Gamrot had was enough to give him the win. I do still believe that Arman won the fight, but it doesn't even matter who really lost. I mean, of course, he's not going to get his win bonus, but it's not going to deter where the loser is going to be in the future. These two guys are probably going to fight each other again for a belt or be number 1 and 2 in the rankings or something. But now the interesting question comes, what happens next? Because I didn't want to talk about it too much until I knew where these guys were going to move in the rankings. With Gamrot now number 8 and Tsarukyan still at number 11, things change, man. As we know, in the lightweight division, nobody really is fighting each other. It's the most stacked division with the least activity, and that's not something we want. So that's why people are jumping on the bantamweight hype, because everybody's fighting each other and it's close in talent. And people are putting up some good arguments that bantamweight is better than lightweight. So right now, bantamweight is where it's at. Bantamweight is the best division to currently watch as a spectator. Once these lightweight matchups get put together though, It's going to be an explosion, man. People are going to be really hyped up about these matchups because Oliveira, Poirier, Gaethje, Makhachev, Chandler, Dariush, Gamrot now, Tony, Tsarukyan, Conor, none of these guys have fights. And that's inside the top 12. All those guys are in the top 12. Only 2 fighters in the top 12 have a fight right now. Just 2. And that's Fiziev versus RDA. No one else is fighting. So it leaves a lot of open discussion on who fights who. With Gamrot now number 8, he's above Tony Ferguson and Rafael Fiziev. There's 2 things you can do here. You edge him up slow. Fight the winner of Fiziev versus RDA because those 2 guys are around his rank. Or you can fight Beneil Dariush, who's number 6. Then there's the other option, and you try to eliminate the older guys in the top 5 and bring up these young guys quickly. We saw that as an example with Hamza Chimaev, even though that jump was really crazy. Gamrot jumping up and fighting, number 3 Justin Gaethje doesn't seem as wild now, but it could be an opportunity to build up a different kind of hype in the top 5. I will tell you this, if Gamrot fights someone like Gaethje, I feel bad for Gaethje, man, if he gets taken to the ground because Gamrot's also a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, man. This guy's a 2-time gold medalist in the 80cc European Championships. And he even went up against Gary Tonin, although he got submitted. He is a super scary grappler. Not just a wrestler like we saw with Arman. If he takes down Justin Gaethje, which he probably can, I mean, his wrestling looks much improved, Gaethje is donezo. He could do the same thing to Dustin. Dustin is an easier fighter to take to the ground, but he has better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu than Gaethje. The scrambles on the ground with Poirier would be more interesting, but I do think that Gamrot might be able to get one over Poirier as well. Just as a striker, he runs into many issues against the 2. So with guys like Dustin and guys like Justin Gaethje, you can rise Gamrot up there pretty quickly and try to get these younger guys in the top 5 quicker. But the thing is, I don't think Poirier would fight Gamrot. I don't think it does anything for him. I think he's more looking into money fights. I know he's calling out, Michael Chandler and stuff, which in itself is a pretty big fight. People know the name Michael Chandler these days. Or he'll just take up, a Colby fight in the welterweight division or something. Justin Gaethje is in a position where he probably can't choose the same kind of opponents because he doesn't have that level of stardom to him. But the thing is then, who does Gaethje fight? If they don't rise Gamrot quickly, who does Justin Gaethje in fact fight next? The Poirier rematch would be pretty cool. I don't know how much people are really asking for it. I mean, if they put it on, it'd be fun to watch. But I'm not going crazy to watch a rematch there. We already saw the Chandler fight. They could potentially do him and Beneil Dariush. They could do him in Islam, but that's an easy win for Islam. The matchup that makes the most sense for Justin Gaethje, in my opinion, would be the winner of RDA and Fiziev. Either RDA or Fiziev goes and fights Justin Gaethje afterward. That makes the most sense in my opinion. And have Gamrot maybe fight, Beneil Dariush? It's hard. It's really hard to think about because they're talking about wanting to do Islam versus Dariush. They're talking about Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor. And if Dustin and Gaethje will not accept that fight, or the winner of RDA Fiziev fights Gaethje, and Dustin's the only other guy above Gamrot that doesn't have a logical fight, that Gamrot would have to fight down, but who's below him? Tony. Tony's not going to fight Gamrot anytime soon. The loser of RDA versus Fiziev, maybe? And below that's Arman Tsarukyan and Conor McGregor. We know Conor's not fighting Gamrot in a million years. It doesn't make sense for business, and doesn't make sense if he wants to win his next fight. It's an interesting problem, and then you go to Arman Tsarukyan, I think it makes more sense the loser of RDA versus Fiziev fights Arman. That makes much more sense than Gamrot fighting the loser. Or you could potentially do, maybe Arman fights Dan Hooker, or Brian Riddell wins his next fight. And just like we know Gamrot's position in the rankings, we also know Shavkat Rakhmonov. He's number 10. He took Neil Magny's spot, and we run into another problem in the welterweight division. 4 fighters out of the top, I guess technically 11, if you count Usman in there, are training partners. Now, it won't be an issue for Usman because he's a champ, and I think any of his teammates in the top 10 would fight him. If it's for a belt, that is. But I don't know the relationship between Shavkat and Burns and Luque. Is he also so close to them that he doesn't want to fight them? Could there potentially be 3 fighters in the top 10 who don't want to fight each other? That's an issue, man. That's a real problem. It's like, okay, we understand the whole squad is at the top. They all made it and that's cool and all, but as a fan, I want to see some good fights, man. And if these guys all get into the top 5, what do you even do at that point? How is the organization going to incentivize them to fight each other? And the only one that can frankly move a division would be Shavkat Rakhmonov. Shavkat maybe can go up to middleweight if he doesn't want to fight his teammates. Here's the thing about Shavkat's position. He's calling out Wonderboy. If anybody around Wonderboy cares about his safety and cares about his health, they would talk him out of fighting him. Because Wonderboy did respond, and he said he's kind of tired of guys taking him to the ground, and he knows that's what's going to happen if he fights Shavkat. So even though it's a good step up for Shavkat, it was a really good call. I just have a feeling it's not going to happen unless Wonderboy just doesn't care anymore. So we know Shavkat is not going to fight Jorge. Jorge's in a different realm these days. He's going into the money fights. He's calling out Conor. He might fight Nate Diaz. Who knows what's going to happen with Jorge? Or he would get a rematch with Wonderboy because he wants that. And if a star wants a fight, it's most likely going to happen. There is Sean Brady, but I wouldn't do that necessarily yet. Because Brady is another young guy, and I want to see him fight other fighters. But depending on how it goes, like if Shavkat goes out there and KOs Sean Brady, Brady may never be the same again, and he's never able to reach his potential. That's why I'm kind of against it. Above these guys, you got Luque. And if Shavkat's too close with him, if they're friends, that's not going to happen. Then there's Bilal Muhammad, who seems to be stuck. That one would make sense considering if Shavkat would not want to fight Gilbert Burns, who's number 4. So number 5, Bilal Muhammad would make sense actually. But I just don't know if Bilal will take up that fight considering where he's at. He doesn't want to fight down. He wants to fight up. And we know Colby's probably out of the discussion. He could wait for the loser of Usman and Leon Edwards, more specifically if Leon loses. Maybe they have that rematch like they're supposed to. Or maybe Bilal goes and fights Hamza. But Hamza's a pretty big name and I think the UFC has different plans for him. They probably want him to fight Colby or for a belt next, not Bilal Muhammad. And they could put together Gilbert Burns and Bilal. So if Shavkat strikes out on the Wonderboy fight, he doesn't have a lot of good options unless Bilal will take it. It's either Bilal, Wonderboy, or if they do it again, putting a fight between 2 young guys, he fights Sean Brady. But let me tell you this, man. Shavkat's a real problem, and I think people are really starting to understand it now. I've been talking about this guy for years. I've been saying how much of a threat he is for the whole weight class, and seeing him absolutely dismantle Neil Magny without even trying that much, it just puts a whole different perspective on his skills. He's a lethal assassin, so dangerous everywhere it goes, and he's huge for the weight class. I mean, they say he's 6'1". Him and Neil Magny were the same height. There's no way he's just 6'1". He has to be 6'3" or reaching there. Massive fighter for the weight class. If I were to be honest about where he stands, I mean, I can see him being Colby Covington, to be honest. It's kind of a basic understanding of it. Can Colby take him down? Maybe not, given how big Shavkat is and how good of a wrestler he is. Even if it does go to the ground, what can Colby do on top of him? He's going to be threatened all over the place. Can Shavkat take Colby down? I think he probably can, considering how RDA was able to take Colby down. I know that's always the go-to about Colby's takedown defense. A small guy like RDA was able to take him down multiple times through a 5-round fight. Colby for sure should have known that RDA would attempt takedowns, so he shouldn't have been caught off guard by the game plan. And if Shavkat takes Colby down and Colby gives up his back or something, because he doesn't necessarily have the best jiu-jitsu out there, that fight could be wraps. And when it comes to the feet, I could definitely see Colby tagging Shavkat over and over again with the left overhand and stuff, but I never really see him hurting him. Due to Colby's recklessness with his defense, I could definitely see Shavkat countering many of Colby's attempts and trying to cause any sort of damage. As you continuously see in his fights, he picks out openings very quickly in a short amount of time. He'll miss some early on, but he adjusts through the fight pretty quickly, man. Where I could definitely see him backstepping and catching right hands on Colby, and possibly aggressive high kicks out of nowhere, just a lulling approach into crazy kicks that come out of nowhere that catches Colby off guard. I could definitely see a Leon fight being very competitive with Shavkat. Leon is a difficult one. That might be a hard guy for Shavkat to solve, considering that Leon is great everywhere. He will be able to defend almost everything Shavkat does until Shavkat starts adjusting in the fight. Because it seems for Leon, he of course adjusts, but not at that kind of pace. It's almost like he's as good in the first round as he is in the 5th. Whereas for Shavkat, it looks like he gets better over time. Of course, Shavkat and Hamza would be insane. That would be an insane fight. I'm seeing more and more people think that Shavkat would beat him. I don't know though, man. It really comes down to how good is Shavkat's takedown defense and how good is Hamza's takedown defense. They would have to attempt takedowns on each other. It would be pretty wild if it was just a straight up striking match. I think Hamza would lose that unless he's able to withstand all the damage and land some big overhand on Shavkat and knock him out. Puncher's chance for Hamza seems to be the best way he wins on the feet. I think Gilbert Burns might be the most difficult matchup for Shavkat. A guy that Shavkat probably doesn't want to take to the ground. He could potentially sit behind a jab just like Hamza was doing before Hamza went crazy and tried to knock him out. And we know Shavkat would never do that. He will stick behind what's working. And he has a longer reach than Hamza. A very good jab. In a way, Gilbert Burns is the most dangerous fight on paper, the most dangerous variables to a fighter. But if Shavkat fights this one smart, he could jab his way into a finish using intelligent footwork with it. Because, man, Burns does not move his head too much unless he's throwing overhands. And he has such a short reach, he has to really get in there. It looks like the best way to catch Shavkat off guard is kind of in dead space early on before he figures you out. A sudden fast explosion early on seems to be the best way to catch Shavkat. And Burns can absolutely do that. He's very, very quick. And if he can land an overhand like he landed on Kamaru Usman, Shavkat could be in trouble. But again, Gilbert Burns is just so short, he's going to have to dive at Shavkat. I see Bilal losing, man. I don't want to say it sound disrespectful to Bilal Muhammad because I really respect how he got here. I mean, nobody ever thought that Bilal Muhammad would ever be in the top 5. But there just seems to be like nothing he does that threatens Shavkat. He doesn't have much power. He's not a great, sophisticated striker. He's like a jack of all trades. He has good wrestling, but it's not rivaling Shavkat's. He's so much smaller too. The grappling is so far apart. On paper, it looks like it's a mismatch. Bilal does have the experience though, and he is somewhat of an intelligent fighter, knows how to win fights. I wouldn't put it past Bilal finding a way, but just thinking about it analytically, it's hard to really grasp a way that Bilal would beat Shavkat. Just like the Burns situation, let's just say Luque and Shavkat would fight each other. Luque would be like a less dangerous version of Gilbert Burns to Shavkat's style. He's pretty much not as fast as Burns. He might not be as powerful. He plods, barely moves. He's good at jiu-jitsu, but not on the level of Burns. He's easier to take to the ground, and he has probably less head movement, making him an easier target than even Burns is. I definitely do see Shavkat beating Luque, but I wonder how Luque can catch him in open space, where there isn't a lot going on, there isn't a lot of feints being presented, and Luque can kind of just explode. That's where I really worry for Shavkat's chances against a lot of these guys like Burns and like Luque. Wonderboy gets mauled. I mean, on the feet, maybe he can catch Shavkat here and there. He can find the lateral movement, straight punches, and Shavkat just doesn't see him in time and gets hurt early, but I think he will be able to pick up on that as the fight is going on. As we do know, Wonderboy is a very tricky fighter when it comes to his footwork. From different stances, a fighter really has to understand the differences of Wonderboy's southpaw to orthodox stances. They are quite different from each other. He almost fights like a different fighter from southpaw to orthodox. And the footwork also has minor yet important differences as well. But my man gets taken to the ground. Like, there's no stopping that. Look at his last couple fights. Now, Jorge Masvidal could be an interesting fight here. Because on the feet, I could definitely see Jorge catching Shavkat off guard here and there. I think his defense would be solid enough for Shavkat not to be able to connect with anything too clean. Jorge is someone that could probably hold his own with Shavkat standing. But he might just get taken to the ground and controlled pretty easily by a much bigger man. Sean Brady would be interesting. I think a lot of people are down on him considering some of his most recent performances. But I would be interested how he takes Shavkat down if he can do that. His jiu-jitsu is pretty legit. And he does explode from a distance. And he can catch Shavkat in kind of that dead space. That would actually be one of the more competitive fights for Shavkat in my opinion. So like the hardest fights for Shavkat are Leon Edwards, Hamza Chimaev, Burns is dangerous, Jorge can present some issues, and Sean Brady. And then we talk about Kamaru Usman. This is something I talked about in my Nightmare Matchup video. The thing about Usman is he's another guy that can contest with Shavkat when it comes to the stand-up. And that's because of his boxing skill and his improvement in his footwork. Look at his footwork against Colby the second time. Actually good lateral movement, actually quicker feet, able to get in and out a little bit differently. It's a rapid improvement to his striking skill that is very dangerous for someone like Shavkat because he's only going to get better the next time. And if anybody can catch Shavkat in dead space where nothing really is going on and just explosion happens out of nowhere, other than Wonderboy and Burns, Usman is the next level of danger. And he's a fighter that can match Shavkat's reach. Maybe not identical, but it's very close. I can see why it's more of an issue for Usman because he's not used to that. He's not used to fighting guys longer than him. And a lot of his success on the feet comes behind his jab. And if that could be completely deflected, imagine eliminating Usman's jab. Things changed for him, man, and I can see Shavkat parrying a bunch of the jabs, but then Usman might do something tricky like he did against Jorge. He throws a jab, but it's not meant to land on the target. It's meant to kind of distract the opponent and make him act on this. So if Shavkat tries to parry that and counter Usman coming in, the right hand could come immediately behind the jab, and the interval between the two punches might be too quick for Shavkat to react to. Right? It's very similar to what Nate Diaz does many times. He throws a jab and then a straight almost at the same time. It's very strange, but almost all the emphasis and reasoning for your jab is put into your power hand. But I definitely do think that Shavkat, because of his kicking ability, would be able to land a bunch of body shots, a bunch of leg kicks. Leg kicks would be a huge weapon there. And I'd be interested to see how he comes up to the head against Usman, because that's something we don't normally see Usman defend against. Head kicks at different angles. Because one thing we do know about Colby is that he was able to land some body kicks on Usman, and even Jorge did as well. Jorge got taken down because he was spamming them unintelligently, whereas Shavkat would never do that. Shavkat is a sniper. And notice Usman's stance, he's very square to his opponent. That makes the body a much bigger target. And the other thing is, can Usman stop the takedown? He probably can. But when is the last time he fought someone bigger than himself? Probably even stronger than himself. Because here's the thing about Shavkat, man. When he got on top of Neil Magny, it looked like a baby fighting an adult. That guy could not really do much to get out of there. It's very resembling to when Luke Rockhold got on top of Lyoto Machida and Chris Weidman. Like, they couldn't do a thing about it. It was like a building was sitting on their chest. That's what it looks like when Shavkat, if he gets into full mount or something, or even into the guard, he crushes it, man. Crushes your guard. So if there is a bit of a strength difference and Shavkat is able to muscle Usman down, this fight is even more in favor of Shavkat than I ever thought. But the thing is, I just don't know. We don't know that. Usman's a great wrestler. He's a superior wrestler, and he's super strong as it is. But we do know that his knees aren't the best. I think he's gotten surgery on them a couple times, and he is a bit older. By the time that Shavkat fights him in the future, maybe he's the one that takes the belt. Maybe it's Khamzat. I don't want to underestimate Leon Edwards' chances, because the more I'm thinking about that fight, I actually do like Leon's chances even more. But hey man, Shavkat and Khamzat, these freight trains are coming full speed ahead. And other than that, there's not too much going on in MMA right now. I mean, no fights really getting announced, no big news or anything, and it's been that way for like a couple of weeks, to be honest. Very dry season for MMA. I mean, we do know that Conor is probably going to fight at the end of the year or early next year. That's what Dana said. He 10-7'd Jorge Masvidal on Twitter. There's no coming back from that. Jorge's been like calling this guy out repeatedly in interviews. And Conor responded with a tweet. He didn't even give Jorge an interview. He just posted a tweet. If you don't know the context, it just pretty much goes like this. Jorge talks about Conor. He says, Conor doesn't want the fight. If he did, he'd post something or say something. He'd probably just insult my mom or some relative of mine or my nation where I come from. And then Conor responds, insult your mom? What a loser you are, mate. Me and your mom get along. Conor still got it. This guy's quick with it, man. So that fight's over. Conor officially won in 2022. The two other things that are talked about is that, John Jones is going to be fighting either Francis or Stipe, as we all know. That's obvious. Francis would be able to fight by December, but he's still waiting to see what happens with the negotiations and stuff. And then Ronda Rousey. I mean, MMA is so dry right now that Ronda Rousey became a headline. She said that she would fight again and she would only fight Gina Carano. And Carano said that it could happen. As much as I don't want to see like Chuck Liddell fight again or Tito Ortiz fight again, or I not want to watch Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano even more. I mean, Gina Carano, she's aight. I just don't know if anyone, do you guys care? Do you guys care if Ronda comes back and fights Gina Carano? When I read that headline, I'm like, there's nothing happening MMA right now besides good fights. Outside of the fights, there's no news. There's nothing else interesting going on. But you know what I am really looking forward to? Your questions. Let's get into them, man. And we're going to start with the members first. The first one by Cam C. How would you describe BJ Penn's career and how much hype he had at one point? To a newer fan of the sport who may have only seen the unfortunate clips online, thank you so much for all the great content. Okay, this one's interesting because among my friends, I am known as the anti-BJ Penn guy. I personally think BJ Penn was very overrated. Not to say he was a bad fighter. He is still, maybe top 20, top 30 greatest fighters of all time. But his career has been overblown beyond what it actually was. The three things that BJ Penn was known for the most. Number one, he was like the lightweight pioneer. He was the first superstar of the lighter weight classes. He brought a lot of attention to the little guys, even though they're not little. Lightweights are actually bigger than most of the average people in the world. I think just the United States and a couple other countries, like lightweights are regarded as smaller people. And BJ Penn used to fight at welterweight and even go up. So, pioneer for the lightweights. Number two, he was a 2-division champion, which was a big deal back then. I mean, beat Matt Hughes twice, which is crazy, man. One of the greatest welterweights of all time, and he beat him twice. And the other thing people know him for is his fighting style. He was always entertaining, super exciting to watch, fantastic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, great boxing for the time, super durable, had a lot of power. I mean, he was so good at Jiu-Jitsu that he earned his black belt in 3 years. In 3 years. It takes people 10 plus years to win their black belt. He won it in 3 years. And as an American, you didn't hear that kind of stuff back then, man. He was a prodigy. But his lack of discipline, combining with his unwillingness to train to a point that he should have, cost him many fights. When he was on that short stretch in the lightweight division, that was when BJ Penn was disciplined, motivated, focused, and training for real. He always was not able to keep that discipline going. There was always like a breaking point. I don't know what would cause it, but it's almost like what happened with Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt was always known to be a guy that hated training. He hated going to the gym. He loved to fight. Fighting was what it was about for him, but he just didn't want to train. And that was one big reason as to why he had so many losses. I mean, people were saying that BJ Penn was over the hill by the time he was 32 years old. 10 years into his MMA career. That is not right, man. Part of it had to do that he was over the hill, but also he wasn't able to keep up with the sport. And he went up to welterweight a little bit too many times. Fighting Nick Diaz, fighting Rory McDonald, fighting GSP the second time. He was jumping weight classes too often, not training seriously enough, and all of this together led up to one of the worst loss streaks in UFC history. Not able to win a fight in 9 years. He tried his hand at featherweight, he went back up to lightweight, he just could not win a fight. So BJ Penn is definitely a legend. He has done great things in his career, stuff that most fighters are never able to do. He had a fantastic style to watch, I mean super fan friendly, always exciting. And if you're a fan of fun fights, knockouts, someone who always goes for the finish, and doesn't care who he fights, how big they are, how strong they are, and going down the road of the lightweight pioneer, Jens Pulver also deserves some credit in that as well. Watch BJ Penn's earlier fights. And I think every MMA fan should watch his Lyoto Machida fight. That's a kind of fight you don't normally see. And then with a cool cat. Hey brother, I will repeat the same question from the past. Since I remember, no one has touched on the subject yet. Earlier this year, surprisingly, Dana had allowed Chad Mendes to fight for bare knuckle fighting, despite still being under the UFC contract. I admit I was quite shocked, as we barely hear of those things happening like nearly ever. Conor is the only other exemption I could think of. What is your take on that, and do you see cross-promotional fights happening? How deep Chad's throat is that Dana said yes to it? Oh my god, you're so wrong for that one, but you're right as well. I mean, you see the size of Chad's neck? One more question though. Have you heard a greater post-fight interview than Chandler's? God bless, I'll see you at the top. It got me so hyped. Thanks for everything you do for our community, brother, the Weasel Nation. Thank you so much for the questions, man. Cross-promotional fights, I think the UFC could be up for other sports. So probably not cross-promotional fights for MMA, but I think they would be down to, have like some of their older guys under the contract that aren't really fighting in MMA anymore to go into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or go on some kickboxing match or something, maybe even some boxing matches. But they have nothing to gain having one of their guys go to Bellator. Number one, Bellator doesn't get as many views. Number two, Bellator is kind of in competition with the UFC. So it's like, why would they give them one of their guys for a fight just to promote them? They don't get money really out of that. I mean, the only time there's an incentive for them to have the cross-promotional fight is like if another organization is as big as they are and the fight can generate massive numbers that they themselves cannot at the moment. Like Conor vs. Floyd. They knew how big that fight was probably going to be. They knew that Floyd versus Conor was going to draw a certain number that the UFC probably is not yet ready to produce. And because of how massive that fight was, they were also going to heavily benefit from that fight. So if like one championship can get massive, we can possibly see what the UFC did in the past with Pride when they sent over Chuck Liddell, right? They sent over their top guy, their biggest star, to go and fight in another organization over there in Pride. If one championship or Rising can do something similar where they can grow that kind of empire in another region of the world, then we might see something like that happen. But right now, there is nothing, besides maybe some boxing fight. And who had a better post-fight interview than Chandler's? It's recency bias, but nobody. Chandler is amazing, man. This guy's like a wordsmith. He could be like the most successful poet in the world right now. I believe so. His stuff's fun. And then we go to John Jordan. Would open scoring be worth it or just create more problems? I've talked about this in the past. It solves some problems and it creates new ones. That's what it's going to be. So what it solves is you're probably never going to get two fighters coasting in a fight. But what might happen is you might always get one fighter coasting in a fight. The fighter who's winning is probably going to coast. And if he knows like by the fourth round he's up 3, he's probably not going to go crazy in the fourth and the fifth. He's just going to do enough to maybe win it, but he doesn't need to win it as long as he doesn't get finished or get 10-8. So you might always get one fighter that knows he's up in the scorecards and he's going to cruise control to a decision. But on the other side, the guy who knows he's losing is going to kick into high gear. He's going to try to make something happen. So you're never going to have a boring fight like Rose versus Carla, because if Rose and Carla knew where they stood on the scorecards, the fight would have unfolded differently for that 5th round. If it's 2-2 going to the 5th, you know they're going to try to win that round. Both fighters are. They're going to give all they can to win the fight. So that's one thing I do like about open scoring, and one thing I don't like about open scoring. It creates a lot of focus on fighters to try to just win rounds. And for the fans' perspective, I think open scoring is fun. I think it'd be cool to know where the fight stands, but there'll be a lot of irritated fans while the fight is going on. If a fighter who clearly lost the round is given a 10-9, the judge saw that he won the round, the fans are going to be annoyed about that, because it's like, who gave him that scorecard? We're going to the 3rd round now. How did you give that second round to fighter B? Fighter B clearly lost that round. And that might be on the fans' minds for, the whole fight, and they're just like edging on for the other guy to try to win. And if the other fighter saw that he lost the round somehow, it might incentivize him to like try to finish this because he knows that maybe the judges are biased against them or something. So there'll be a lot of drama with open scoring. And then we go to the patrons, and we're going to start with Dangerously Dubious Double Davidson. Hey Weasel, love your content. Part of what made Olives versus Gaethje such an interesting fight is that I wanted to see if Olives could develop the wrestling necessary to take down a high-level wrestler like Justin Gaethje. After this fight and his inability to take down even Dustin Poirier, I came to the interesting conclusion on who his nightmare matchup would be, and that is Prime RDA. He had excellent strength, cardio, fantastic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and solid wrestling. He would be extremely hard to sub, and his striking is extremely fundamental and textbook. What do you think about Prime RDA being a nightmare matchup for Olives? That's a good pick, man. Yeah, definitely. On paper, he does everything really well. And in the lightweight division, he never really had a problem getting taken down. It's usually against the bigger guys at welterweight. I mean, they're able to just muscle him to the ground. At lightweight, look at when Eddie Alvarez tried to take him to the ground. Got completely thwarted. And considering that Olives couldn't take down Dustin, definitely couldn't take down Gaethje, his way of taking you to the ground is very strength-oriented. It's a lot of body locks and stuff. He will shoot double legs on you, but he has to get the right timing on your punches to do that. And RDA did not overextend. On the feet, for sure, RDA beats Charles Oliveira, for sure, 100%. And if Oliveira, even if he gets RDA to the ground, which I have a hard time seeing, RDA is solid, man. He's so solid. He survived on the ground against Khabib pretty well. He got in some bad positions, but didn't get subbed, didn't get close to getting ground and pound to a finish. And Oliveira is very good on top. I think he's better than RDA, but RDA is no slouch. He's the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist that Oliveira has ever fought. I think RDA would damage Oliveira round by round and probably finishes him in like the third. Then we go to Jesse Griffin. Marc Goddard said, a good judge should be able to judge a fight down to the finest details and nuances within the rules that a 10-10 round should never exist. A good judge should never give a round a draw. Thoughts? I disagree. It wouldn't just take a good judge. It would take a perfect judge that doesn't make mistakes. Only if a judge is like a supercomputer and he can memorize how many strikes are landing and he could really differentiate how much damage is being inflicted there, who's really winning in the grappling exchanges. If the judge knows all the ins and outs about fighting, then yes. But with human error and the fact that it's almost impossible to really dictate all this in real time, cage side with an audience going crazy around you, the 10-10 round makes up for that human error. Because unless you're going to get some like robots to start judging fights, you're always going to have some kind of error where 10-10 rounds need to happen. Sometimes fights are too close for the judges to get right in real time. It's just too much to ask for. Fights are crazy, man. It's not like basketball. It's not like, some traditional team sport where it's very easy to tell who's winning. You just score points. In this, you're like differentiating the damage and who's getting better positions. You have to really understand the techniques involved instead of just seeing, when does the ball go into the hoop? It's so different. Even in wrestling, they have a scoring system for just takedowns. They do it so differently even for wrestling. It's just the striking sports and MMA where you have to use your opinions more. Because ultimately, the scoring system relies on the judge's opinion of the fight. In a perfect world with the perfect judges, Marc Goddard is right. But in the real world with real humans as judges, then Marc Goddard, I think, is wrong. They go to Bradley Hartley. Do you think that every fighter should have a threat of a takedown? Seeing as fighters become more hesitant when wrestling becomes a factor in a fight, imagine Wonderboy, Izzy, Conor, etc. having a takedown threat to go with their elite striking. That is going to be the future of MMA. I don't know when that's going to happen, but it will happen one day. You're going to see the best strikers also have elite wrestling, and elite wrestlers have great striking and stuff just going into the sport at a young age. One day that's going to happen. And, if like Adesanya had great takedowns, right now, nobody would beat him. Maybe besides Whitaker has a chance, considering how great his takedown defense is. Besides Aldo, Whitaker is probably the best anti-wrestler in the sport. Everyone else gets destroyed. No one else has a chance at all. Kenner goes to a wrestling clinic. Vettori, the same fight happens again. Paulo Costa loses on the feet and then on the ground. Pereira gets pounded to dust. Yeah, it'd be so different, man. And you give a look at Zhang Weili. Weili's always had takedowns to her game, but a big reason why she even beat Joanna was because she trained so much for her wrestling. And that reason is also going to give her a big chance in beating Carla Esparza. And you can look back in the day at GSP. GSP was an elite striker who didn't really have much wrestling. Because he focused so much on wrestling, he eventually became like the greatest wrestler in MMA history. We're just at a state right now, MMA is still young, and we're not at that point yet. Then we go to Matthew Wall. Hi Weasel, love your content. How would you see Max Holloway versus Prime Tony Ferguson go? Michael Bisping versus Rich Franklin, Prime Rockhold versus Adesanya, and finally Prime Carlos Condit versus Michael Chandler. Thanks for the best breakdowns in the game. I think Prime Tony beats Prime Holloway for sure in the lightweight division. Now, they don't strike the same. They have similar qualities in how they approach a fight. Super aggressive, a lot of combinations, puts their opponents back to the wall. Cardio machines, insane chins, really hard to hurt. Uses all different kind of weapons with their striking. Tries to defend the takedowns and really good at catching chokes. But imagine Tony just like a bigger version, more powerful version. Much, much longer. He has like a 7-inch reach advantage. And we know that Holloway doesn't do as well against guys who can outpunch him. And Tony Ferguson will be able to keep up with him the whole step of the way, get into exchanges and catch Holloway and get the better of him. If Tony wanted, he could sit behind a jab and stuff, and he could just pot shot. Holloway would be digging in for combinations and maybe running into spinning elbows and stuff. Ultimately, I think Max would be outpunched, lose in most of the exchanges, and ultimately get forced backwards against Tony. And that would go on and on for 5 rounds, in my opinion. Tony will never fade. With Dustin, when he fought Max, yeah, Max did pretty well, but Dustin doesn't have a Tony chin, and he was starting to gas a little bit in the later rounds. Michael Bisping versus Rich Franklin. I would definitely have to go with a prime Michael Bisping. Franklin was in an era where, man, the defense was just so different, and the offenses were so obvious. His southpaw left straight was a big weapon of his, but ultimately had all the super basic setups that in today or even 5 years ago, it would never fly. Bisping is just overall a much more technical striker. He would make Franklin miss over and over again. Franklin has a lot of power though, but I think Bisping, even if he gets caught here and there by dropping his hands, which he does very often, I think he would be able to win by decision. I think Adesanya destroys Rockhold. If Rockhold gets Adesanya to the ground, that fight is pretty much over. Rockhold destroys Adesanya, but he's just not good of a wrestler in my opinion. Unless some mix-up happens and Adesanya falls to the ground, maybe something similar to happen between him and Lyoto. He kind of shoved Lyoto, but if something strange like that happens to Adesanya, that would be Rockhold's best chance of winning the fight. But the thing is, I don't think Rockhold would survive long enough in the stand-up, as long as Adesanya puts it to him. Because if Adesanya coasts there, he's giving Rockhold too many chances. Adesanya could literally be super aggressive against Rockhold and knock him out very early, probably even first round. So, maybe 70-30 for Adesanya there. And finally, Prime Carlos Condit versus Michael Chandler. I would have to go with Michael Chandler. We're talking about Carlos Condit, who has the worst takedown defense in history. Dudes in a mosh pit would be able to knock this guy over. And Chandler's a big guy, man. He probably weighs around Carlos Condit. Now, in the striking, Chandler doesn't have much of a chance. Condit would be able to take Chandler's biggest punches, head kick him into an oblivion, counter his entries, and the combination he's able to put together while Chandler's on the back foot would catch him so easily. The low to high kicks and stuff would absolutely catch Chandler, try to exit at an angle, which he does very often when he thinks he's in the clear. I think Condit would catch him at the end of the shots, but if Chandler decides to wrestle from the first round, nothing is stopping him. The thing is, though, Condit had really good cardio, and if Chandler gasses out in the 5th round, then Condit knocks him out. So now that I'm thinking about it, Condit could tough his way through until the 4th and 5th rounds if it is a 5-round fight, and knock a gas Chandler out cold. But if it's a 3-round fight, Condit really doesn't have much of a chance. And then we go to the public questions. We're going to start with Bro Conkle. After watching so many of Yuri's fights, especially his last fight with Glover where he won the belt, how much do you think his willpower affects his ability to win? His will seems indomitable, and even after all the damage, mistakes, and badly compromising positions, he still found a way to win. I think his willpower really is his strongest attribute now, over everything else. Keep up the great work, Weasel. Yeah, I can agree to that, man. He was put in so many bad positions. Before the fight happened, you would think if Glover was on his back, Glover got into full mount, you thought this fight would be over. If you were to think about that before the fight happened, that Glover would get his back and Glover would get into full mount multiple times, you think Yuri gets finished. But the fact he was able to persevere his way out of this, get the fight where he did best, and then eventually submit Glover in the 5th round, which is so crazy. He's a true fighter at heart. He's a warrior. A true fighter makes anything work at any given moment. You give him an opening, he's going to take it, regardless of who he's fighting. Even if he was fighting, Rickson Gracie, and he saw there was an opportunity to choke him out, he would go for it. Doesn't mean he would succeed, but he would instinctively go for it. Because remember in that 5th round, when Glover rocked him, it looked like Yuri was almost out. People are looking too much that Glover made a mistake there, which he absolutely did going for the guillotine, but we also have to give Yuri the credit for surviving that, turning the whole fight around, even if Glover is on his back. Yes, he's tired and stuff. Yuri is almost knocked out. The guy was just all instincts. He didn't even know what was happening in that moment. I mean, they told him in the press conference that he got punched there by Glover, and he said he didn't remember that. That's how out of it he was. He was able to recall hours later many moments that happened in the fight, but he could not remember that Glover rocked him. So for him to go from taking punches like that to submitting him minutes later, you're never safe when you're fighting Jiri Prochazka, no matter who you are. He submitted the best grappler in the top 15. He knocked out one of the better strikers in the top 15. And no, he's not the most technical striker. He's not the most technical grappler. No one would ever say that. But that's not what it's all about. You could be as skilled as you want. We can analyze how technical a certain fighter is at throwing a left hook and setting up his right cross and throwing all these different kind of techniques out there. We can read all the books we want. We can analyze all the fights we want. When it comes to someone like Jiri Prochazka, that's not what it's all about. It's an innate quality that Jiri has that no one can analyze accurately. Is something that he's willing to make happen no matter what he's going up against. He put unnoticed in that whole weight class. No matter who you are and what you're good at, you are in danger at all times. No matter how much you hurt him, no matter what you're good at, you are always going to be in danger unless you put this guy out, unconscious. They were going to Mr. Gatame. If the UFC didn't have weight cutting and their divisions similar to one, who would be the champ of each division? Would they look similar to how they are now? Just every champion just moved up a weight? Or will we see new champions emerge that wouldn't have otherwise? I look forward to videos every week, man. Keep up the great work. Yeah, so one championship's weight cutting is different, right? You're only able to cut a certain amount of percent. I don't know if I want to go down to every single fighter, find out what they weigh and how much they can cut. It comes down to literally the percentage. So they can cut weight, but they cannot be dehydrated. But there's different levels of dehydration. What would Colby Covington's weight be before he reaches that, that dehydration level that they're not allowing? Because he weighs less than a lot of the other welterweights or, Wonderboy Thompson or something. So pretty much how it goes is lightweight is not 155 in one championship. It's actually 170. Welterweight is 185. Middleweight is 205. Light heavyweight is 225 and heavyweight is 265. And you just go all the way down. It's just every weight class is the one above. They only added the 225-pound weight class for light heavyweight. So that pretty much means most of the fighters in the UFC would go up a weight class. For most of them. But there's a few fighters that's not going to happen to. Israel Adesanya potentially would still be able to fight at 185. And what that means is he'd be fighting Usman, Edwards, Hamza Chimaev, etc. This is his weight class. Considering if he walks around at, 200 pounds, would Adesanya be the champion 185 when all the welterweights go up? A lot of wrestlers coming up. Usman's a tough fight. Hamza's a tough fight. Shavkat would probably be a tough fight. And I could see him win or lose any of these matchups. Because he's so much of a superior striker to all of them, his wrestling just doesn't compare at all. And probably the best fighter to be able to take him down in the center of the cage would probably be, maybe Hamza. Usman and Shavkat could definitely do it. And Hamza has the ability to choke him out, take his back, and all that. That's why Shavkat and Hamza might be the most dangerous. If I were to pick a fighter that would be the champion, I think it's a 50-50 between Hamza and Shavkat. And we do have Colby Covington and Gilbert Burns, who are most likely going to stay at 170. And that's even more interesting. How do they go up against Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje, Islam Makhachev? That division would be up in the air at 170 because I could see Charles Oliveira beating Colby Covington, but it might be difficult for him to beat Gilbert Burns. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, I think Gilbert Burns might become the champ. But he could have a hard time with Justin Gaethje if he cannot take him to the ground. Dustin Poirier will give him a run for his money as well. And Michael Chandler if they were to fight each other. They train in the same place. So I say the most likely champion would be maybe Gilbert Burns. And then Charles Oliveira and Colby Covington, it's like up in the air between the two. Because I think Colby would dominate the rest of the division easier than Oliveira would. But Oliveira has a good chance of beating Covington. And I think Burns might beat Colby. Islam Makhachev definitely has a stake in there as well because I can see him beating Colby Covington. I can see how he beats Burns, but that's a very dangerous fight for him. And him and Charles Oliveira is like a 50-50 fight. So he's in the run there as well. It's such a competitive division with Colby and Burns in there that it's almost impossible to really know who would be the champ. But I think it's safe to say it's between the four guys: Oliveira, Islam, Colby, and Burns, with Burns probably having the best chance at becoming champ. Now with a 225-pound weight class, there is one heavyweight that can drop down, and that's probably Stipe. Tom Aspinall can do it, but he might get too dehydrated to do it. Stipe is like the lightest guy in the whole top 10. I mean, he fought in the 230s multiple times, so he would definitely be able to make 225 for sure, and fight those light heavyweights. So with Stipe fighting guys like Jiri Prochazka, Magomed Ankalaev, Glover Teixeira, etc., I think Ankalaev would have the best chance of becoming champ, with Stipe and Jiri being right there. If we want to also include Tom Aspinall just for fun, I still think Ankalaev is number one, But Aspinall would be putting up good fights between all those guys at the top. Him and Yuri would be such a good fight. Him and Stipe would be insane. But I wonder how much of his power would diminish losing that much weight. Because he does have some fat on him. He can trim down a bit before he cuts water weight. So that's an interesting question, man. I really hope they do something like that in the future because the weight cutting is kind of crazy. It's so unhealthy, man. And as long as they have that system in place, fighters are going to cut weight. And they're going to Kaisak. Asked this last time, but what are your thoughts on Wonderboy moving up to 185? He's talking about the weight cut is awful for him. 185 is also mainly strikers and more shallow. If he was younger, I would have liked it, but he's just a little too old at this point, and he's much smaller than all those guys. He's saying that the weight cut is bad, but a couple of years ago, he was saying that he doesn't cut much weight. So what that must mean is, because he's getting older, the weight cut's becoming harsher on his body, and he may have gained some weight, maybe some muscle and stuff, but even at 185, at his age, I just don't see it happening. Way over the hill at this point, and if they throw him Derek Brunson or, Robert Whittaker or Vettori, Andre Muniz, or one of these guys that could take him down, if you think the guys at 170 take him down was bad, at 185, it would be just sad to watch. Striking for striking, he still loses the majority of those matchups. And then with the large arsed Superman, if Julianna defeats Nunes again somehow, after Shevchenko's wrestling weak points being displayed on Saturday, has your prediction for the potential bantamweight bout between Julianna and Shevchenko changed in any way? Personally, I still give it to Valentina. Shevchenko already beat Pena pretty easily when they fought each other a few years ago, and Pena really hasn't changed too much in her wrestling. Very similar to what she's always done. It's kind of sloppy. She leaves her arms out for the open, she's very long, but just careless when she's on top, and it costs her. I mean, that's why she got submitted even by Jermaine Duranamy, and that should never happen. Getting submitted by GDR is a red flag. You've done something completely wrong, and that mistake hasn't really changed. Now, some people might question what happened with Santos when she fought Shevchenko, though. Santos was able to take her to the ground and control her, but Santos just sat on top of her. She didn't really, if she was able to transition and get her back, she didn't do it carelessly, she did it correctly. Pena is just so fidgety on top, she's trying to make things happen and force openings and land big ground and pound shots and isn't really as aware of where her body is, where her arms are. She's just trying to make things happen, and that's why she gets caught in submissions. So because of that, I would have to go to Shevchenko. And then we go to Vukoye. After hearing Ali Abdelaziz's latest ridiculous claim, do you think that Usman would be able to beat anyone at light heavyweight? He said that? Hold on, I can't believe this. Let me look this up. No way. I just rewatched the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. I believe Usman will beat Yuri, Yan, and Glover. Not talking trash, but this is real. What? Okay, and then your question is, run through the top 15 quickly if you can. Also, do you think he could beat Whittaker or Vettori at middleweight? I love your content, man. Keep it up. Thank you so much for the question. I don't really have to go through it. He lose to all of them. Do you know how much bigger those guys are than Usman? At his biggest, Usman probably weighs 200. And that's probably not even in shape. These light heavyweights are walking around at over 220. Yuri said he lost weight on purpose to not be over 220 because he wanted to feel light in the fight and not have a bad weight cut. Maybe he can find a way to beat Anthony Smith. Maybe take him to the ground. If he's strong enough, he can hold him down for a while. Or, shut down Paul Craig's whole grappling game and punch him out. I'm still not confident at all that he does that. I guess if you want to be super generous, maybe Usman could beat them too, but nobody else. Imagine Kamaru Usman versus Magomed Ankalaev. What can Usman do? What could he do to him? He's not taking him down. He's getting taken down, actually. He's not boxing with him. Even if they get into an exchange, as close as Usman gets, he's going to get outpunched every time. He always has a puncher's chance, even against light heavyweights, always. He could knock out any of them with one punch, potentially. Catches them off guard, by surprise, maybe. That is such a ridiculous claim. Dude, that's like having Charles Oliveira fight the middleweights. There's no one he beats. He gets ended by all of them. But now we're talking about Whittaker and Vettori. This is a little bit more realistic, but they are both much bigger than Usman. Whittaker puts that Australian lockdown on Usman. His best chance of winning is Whittaker runs into a punch. He blitzes at the wrong time and puts his chin at the end of Usman's fist. Because Usman is not taking him down. Usman is not striking with him. He's smaller than Whittaker as well and slower. The only thing going for Usman is it's a fist fight and Whittaker doesn't have a good chin. For Vettori, the chin factor goes away now. But Usman is a better striker and is a better wrestler. But I don't see him taking Vettori down. Vettori might take him down, just muscle him. And I think the pressure would just ultimately be too much, potentially at the end of it. I think with the Carnage 29, After Burns comments on Leon Edwards saying out of Leon, Covington, and himself, Leon has the best chance of beating Usman, what are your thoughts on Leon's chances of beating him? I favor Usman, but I've also thought that he has a good chance of winning. I think he's going to the point that Leon is careful, he's calculated, and he's good at everything. He also has the attributes that Gilbert doesn't, right? He's long, he's tall, so he doesn't lack in any department. Besides, I think people might look too much into the 1-2 combo that Nate Diaz caught him with. Besides that, like, where has Leon looked vulnerable? Not many places, man. He's very, very well-rounded, and he's technical everywhere, so it's not like a jack of all trades. He's actually good everywhere. I definitely see what Burns is looking at. Leon has a striking skill that Covington doesn't have. He has the height and reach that Covington and Burns do not have. And I'm like you, man. I favor Usman, for sure. I can't go against him in this matchup, but the more I think about the fight, the more I like Leon's chances. Right, so he's going to be a massive underdog. Yeah, he's almost a 3-1 underdog. It's enough for me to think that, maybe if you're a betting guy, you would put something on Leon. It's not a bad bet at all. And even if you look at their first fight, which was so long ago, they were way more one-dimensional than they are now. I mean, that's a Usman that didn't have any boxing, and that's Leon that didn't have much wrestling. Even back then, the fight was not easy for Usman. Imagine if Leon is able to defend takedowns. Usman's going to be in trouble because it's going to be tough for him to find some shots. Leon is the kind of striker that can make Usman look a bit reckless or even silly in the stand-up. The two big shots going for Usman are, of course, the jab and the straight right. But Leon knows that. Every other punch from Usman is not at the same level. His left hook is getting much better. He dropped Colby Covington with it. But it's not a kind of hook that's probably going to catch Leon. His looping punches with his right hand are just not it. He will go to the body if you clinch up with him, but from a distance where Leon is going to keep the fight, Usman falls behind on so many different categories. I think I could see him landing jabs. Right crosses could land eventually. If Usman can catch Leon in the orthodox stance, then you could kind of mimic what Nate was able to do. But I think people are reading too much into it. It would be kind of crazy if Usman catches him with the same combo and puts him down. Then we're talking about the same weakness that Jorge has, because Jorge has a real weakness to this. Jorge does not do well against the 1-2 combo. It's the most basic combo in combat sports. But the majority of times that Jorge was dropped was by the same combination. And you cannot say that about most fighters. That would be pretty wild, right? But overall, Leon should be able to put it to Usman. His distance management is better. He's going to have the kicks. He's super dangerous in the clinch. That's one guy that Usman's going to have to really respect if he ties up with him. I mean, look what he was able to do against Gunnar Nelson. Those elbows are terrifying, and those knees are going to be coming up. I could definitely see him landing a lot of leg kicks, and the thing you have to give to Leon Edwards as the biggest weapon that he has is his fight IQ. His decision-making in the octagon, for the most part, is not comparable to most of the fighters here. There's only a select few that can match Leon Edwards when it comes to making the right decisions at the right times. That's his biggest weapon. He's very intelligent in the cage. And then with the Bat Cave Oz, can chewing massive amounts of chewing gum and doing weight training on one's neck significantly improve one's ability to take a punch without being knocked out? Asking for a friend, yeah, sure. Keep up the great content, champ. Thank you so much, man. Interesting question. Now, chewing gum is something a lot of people have done in the past, a lot of old-time boxers. And what we do know is it does build muscle, more so along the jawline. But you do have to do this regularly. So yeah, chewing a lot of gum is going to have to happen. You will probably get a ton of cavities and your teeth are going to be all jacked up. And strengthening your neck is definitely something that can help you take a punch better. Neck training is very important, but as we all know, it's not going to make a massive difference. If you have a glass chin, chewing gum and strengthening your neck is not going to give you Francis Ngannou chin. That's not going to happen. You're always going to have somewhat of a weaker chin, always. Because it doesn't have as much to do with your neck or your jaw or your face. It has more to do with the brain and the fluids and other layers like the meninges around the brain. Some people are born different. For an example, back when my mom got the brain surgery, they actually found out that she had excessive fluids around her brain. And these fluids are something that keeps your brain intact. So the more you have here, the stronger the meninges are. I don't know if they become more dense or something. The excess that you have in that area, the harder the ability is for you to get knocked out if you take a punch. So it's actually kind of wild. I used to joke with my mom that she has a really good chin. And that's a natural thing. You're not going to be able to really adjust that unless there is some kind of crazy surgery or something. You know what? I have to look this up. If there's a surgery that can create more meninges around your brain, increase the fluid somehow without giving you headaches, because it was giving my mom headaches. She used to get them regularly, like very often. Fighters would 100% get these surgeries, man. Dog, these guys are crazy, man. 100% these guys would be getting brain surgery to strengthen their chin, to strengthen their brain from getting knocked out. So yeah, to answer your question, it will help you for sure. Chewing gum, neck exercises for sure are only going to benefit you outside of the cavities you're probably going to get. So, and then we go to XYZ Tuv. After seeing Jiri go 5 rounds, how do you think his cardio stacks up against the other light heavyweights? Is he now in the anomaly bracket of fighters who have both great power and cardio? I don't think he has great cardio. I should rephrase that. When you think of Jiri Prochazka, you don't think of a guy like Colby Covington or Tony Ferguson. I honestly think it's his willpower. I honestly think he powers through it. He's getting tired. Like we saw him in the Glover fight. He was getting tired before Glover was, and he ended up fresher than Glover. How does that happen? And they were both going crazy on each other. It wasn't like Glover was the only one acting and he was the only one gassing out. Jiri was gassing out too because he was attacking crazy as well. It's just like in the last question what Bro Conkle brought up. It has to do something with that willpower, man. So his cardio is good. I don't really question it going into the 5th round if he can persevere like that. Regardless if you want to call it cardio, willpower, his ability to last in a fight, his endurance is crazy. And the fact that he also has insane power to go with it. In a way, yeah, he's one of the anomaly fighters like Kamaru Usman, like Jessica Andrade. These fighters who have insane power and could just last in fights at a crazy pace. I think with a Pocho Mex. If Tony Ferguson turned down the Gaethje fight and just moved up to welterweight back in 2020, is it possible his career would have been in a better place in 2022? Or is it more likely to have gone worse? Also, what do you think of Mayar Evloev versus Bryce Mitchell? And finally, how does Weili Zhang do against the women's flyweight division? Yeah, I don't think it would be controversial to say that Tony's career would have been in a better place now if he never fought Gaethje. Because that Gaethje fight is for sure a reason why he is on this decline. That kind of damage it's going to last with you, man. It's going to last forever. It's going to have a major impact on your life, let alone your career. So 100%, if he could have avoided that fight, no matter how he did it, his career would have been in a better place. Whether it be going up to welterweight, whether it be him just pulling out, whether it be him just not wanting to fight Gaethje. And at welterweight, the guy could have been a threat. Would he be a champion? I don't think so. But he could have put on some interesting fights with some guys up there. Like, I do think like Colby beats him. I think Leon Edwards would have beaten him. But maybe against like Jorge, that would have been a fun one to watch. And that was when Jorge was on his way up. I think a fight with Nate Diaz or even Wonderboy Thompson or Jeff Neal or Vicente Luque. Like a lot of these fights would be very interesting with Tony Ferguson. And what do I think about Mayar Evloev versus Bryce Mitchell? These are two guys that could be in the top 5 in the future. And they want to fight each other. So if they were to fight each other, I think it's a great fight. I mean, talking about the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu of Bryce Mitchell, who's developing much better striking, versus Mayar Evloev, who's a great wrestler and developing great striking. I don't know why that whole thing was going around that Mayar Evloev had bad cardio. People were looking at the Hakeem Dawodu fight, and yeah, he was getting kind of tired. He was getting takedowns even in the 3rd round. It wasn't like he was gassed. I look at his latest fight with Dan Ige. Dan Ige is a legit fighter. Well-rounded. Great wrestling, good striking, everything, man. Tough guy, powerful. Mayar toyed with him on the ground and on the feet. Mayar's striking ability in that fight shocked me. I did not think he would look that good on the feet already. But if I were to pick one of them, I think it's 50-50, man. I could see both guys winning. I think it's easier to pick Mayar. And just his style seems more catering to ride out to a decision and neutralize a lot of what Bryce Mitchell does. So if I were to lean to somebody, I might lean to Mayar, but that fight could go either way. And Zhang Weili in the women's flyweight division, she beats everyone besides Shevchenko. And I just want to clear something up about Zhang Weili. There's a few people that are defensive about Zhang Weili and what I said about the whole steroid thing. I said 2 things can explain her strength. Number 1, she's been wrestling a lot, training a lot with Henry Cejudo, and developing proper technique for her power to generate through. And then I said, or it could be some other stuff. It was a joke, man. I don't think Weili's doing any steroids. I don't think she's taking any PEDs. People are just way too sensitive about Zhang Weili. I don't know why it is. But no, I don't think she's on anything because she's never gotten caught. There's never been allegations. And I think she's one of the best fighters right now. I had to make that clarification because still, even to this day, ever since that fight with Joanna, people keep asking me, why are you accusing Zhang Weili of steroids? I'm not. I never did. But those traps, though, man, those are something different. That is not natty. You know, I'm just kidding. She's always been in great shape, and honestly, she doesn't even look like she's on steroids. So that's the end of the episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast, and if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe. Get on track to that road to 1 million, and I'll see you guys in the next video.